Hi, Janice.
Hi, Jennifer. Welcome. Are the other presenters here yet?
Yep, everyone's here. I think they might just be turning their mic and cam on. Here we go.
Right. Okay. I think we'll probably just get started then. Welcome everyone to presentation 5A. One of the presentations at the end of the day, but not one that's any less looked forward to. Just before we get started, just to let you know that we have one presentation for this session now. Unfortunately, the presenters for the second presentation have been unable to come. So what that's going to mean is we'll stick to time in terms of your presentation, Jennifer, that's coming up. But it means obviously we'll have time for questions. We'll see how that goes, and it may be that we'll finish a little early. So we'll just see how that all goes. So
we've just got one last, sorry, Janice, we've got one last person who needs to be invited to the stage, Adam Gordon.
Right, I think it will be Wendy, our tech support, that will do that for us.
Yes.
I don't think we had a note of Adam. We do have a note of Charlie. Is Charlie coming?
No, Charlie's Adam is being Charlie, so to speak.
Right, that's fine. So lovely to see you all. Thanks very much, and thanks to everybody for coming to the presentation. So we have a presentation here today from Jennifer Boyle, Joanna Royle, Emily Hay, and Adam Gordon, and it's entitled "This PhD Life: Conference as a Site of Community," which sounds a really interesting topic and one that I'm interested in because I quite often teach about PhD supervision and that area of research. Just before we go for any further, can I just check that all of you are okay with being recorded?
Yeah.
Great, that's great. And just for participants, you'll be used to this by now. If you put any questions you have for the presenters into the Q&A, and we'll pick them up at the end. Okay, just in your own time when you're ready. Thanks very much.
Okay, I'm just gonna get my screen share sorted. And am I correct that I shouldn't be able to see anything other than my slide now? And if so, can everybody see my slide? Hello?
Thumbs up in chat, Joanna.
I literally can't see anything, I'm afraid. I can literally just see my slide. So everyone in my group is going to have to take cues and nudge me verbally. But anyway,
sorry, Joanna, before you start, if you can switch to presentation mode, just because you can't see chat, people are requesting that you switch to presentation mode.
Presentation mode? I thought I was in presentation mode. I am at a loss to do. Could someone give me an additional hint as to what you're looking for here?
We're looking at the PowerPoint in its editing mode.
Yeah.
Is what we can see on our screen.
And then I put it to presenting mode, and you don't see it as a presenting mode now?
No, it's not changing.
And now?
Try unsharing and then resharing, please.
Okay.
Mia suggested that you're maybe sharing the wrong window. So if you're using two screens, it might be
I'm
that
not
you're
using
sharing
two screens. I'm just using the one screen. I'm terribly sorry. I didn't realize this would. This is an unusual problem. It's not one that I've had before. Please do bear with me whilst we try to fix this.
We've got plenty of time, so no rush.
Still not?
No.
No, afraid not. We may have to run with this and just click through.
If anyone else would like to have a go, I'm terribly sorry, folks. This is not. Oh, thanks, David. That makes me feel slightly better that it happened to someone else. Obviously, we all use Zoom an awful lot, and that works just fine on Zoom. If anyone's able to give me some advice, I will happily take it. Another presenter shared, and it worked. Maybe if someone else fancied having a go. I realise we're wasting time here, but we are in the lucky position of not having someone following us. Otherwise, I'm afraid we will just have to go with the view that we've got. But if someone else wants to have a quick go and see if they can make that work.
Just pulling it up from SharePoint to make sure it's the most up-to-date version. Okay, I'm going to share.
Thanks for your patience, folks. Apologies for this unexpected technical.
I think online things wait until it's a presentation to a group of people you've not presented to before. I had to do a workshop to lots of very senior supervisors, and that was the precise moment for the very first time my microphone decided it didn't really want to work anymore and to switch to a new input. So I think it definitely lies in wait.
It does. It does. I had a technical mistake this time I met my boss. How is that?
Can people see?
No.
No.
Hello.
Still not seen.
I'm glad I just popped in at this exact moment to see how things were going. But can I just double check? You're not able to share your slides, is that correct? Are you using a Mac?
Joanna wasn't, I was.
Okay, so if you're using a Mac and you've not given screen recording permissions to Chrome or whichever browser you're using, Macs are funny and they require you to do that in the background.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into your system preferences on your Mac for your whole Mac, not for whichever browser you're using, then there's a icon on the side called Security and Privacy. It looks like a little house with a lock on it.
Yes.
If you go into that, on the left-hand side, there should be a thing that you can scroll down. You're looking for the button that says screen recording, and it's a red cube with a white circle and a white dot in it.
Yes.
Yeah, and you need to make sure that for whichever browser you're using, whether it be Safari or Chrome, the tick box is checked, and it'll make you restart, but it'll take you about 30 seconds.
Okay, I mean, Joanna wasn't using a Mac, as far as I know. Problem. So perhaps Joanna, it's better if one of the other presenters shares their.
Are you the other person that was struggling to share?
I was quite capable of sharing. What I couldn't do was get it to go into presenter mode.
Go into presenter mode when you couldn't, so that you couldn't see Remo, or just go into presenter mode entirely?
We were seeing the edit mode. The other people, the other participants were seeing the edit mode.
So if you start the presentation mode before you start the screen share on Remo, it'll automatically select the presentation mode when you start sharing on Remo. So if you, on PowerPoint, start presentation mode.
We promise the talk is worth the wait, folks.
Oh, glory me. It's a fantastic talk. You're going to absolutely love it. Go away thinking that was the talk of the conference. Something like that.
This is actually scheduled build up.
Yeah, absolutely.
This was all pre-planned.
All of it, the drama.
All the anticipation.
Right, we're going to have another go, folks. I've now got it open. Yeah. Oh, for goodness sake. Have it open in presenter mode, though.
Oh, this looks hopeful to me.
Major success.
Success.
Major success.
Wonderful.
Thank you, Caitlin.
Excellent. I think we're back on track. That was just the exciting build-up, and now for the letdown. Okay,
I'll take myself off stage, but I'll lurk in the background for like 2 minutes just to make sure that you guys are okay.
Thanks, Caitlin.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. What are we going to talk about? I want to kick off with a quick rhetorical question. Why do we go to conferences like this one today? It's all right. I don't need answers in the chat unless you want to give me some. I would say that usually a good free lunch plays into it, but you guys, you're all still here despite the lack of those quite nice little chocolate mousse pots that usually turn up at the Learning and Teaching Conference. So I'd guess if it's not for the chocolate pots, then you came to learn about and to share good practice and to experience a sense of academic neighbourhood with peers who are similarly motivated to be great educators. So conferences, oh, Julia, I love that answer. Also for the Schadenfreude, obviously. But other than for the Schadenfreude, conferences are a site of community.
So this talk is about a very specific conference, and it's a conference called This PhD Life, which we in the research and development team offer as now an integral part of induction for new postgraduate research students. In case you're not aware of the research and development team, just in terms of structure, where we are in the university, we are part of the Research and Innovation Service, but we're roughly cognate with the Student Learning Development team, and that whereas they work with undergraduates and postgraduate taught students, we work with researchers to help smooth them into their studies, offer opportunities for them to develop, etc. In recent years, especially since Joanna has arrived, we've been working closely with individual graduate schools to sort of smooth the transition into doctoral research and to make sure that our new researchers feel welcome, that they feel cared for, and that they feel equipped to sort of navigate this new existence, this new journey as researchers. Joanna and I are sort of half of the permanent researcher development team. You might have met other people, Sam Oakley and Kay Guccione. We also have fantastic interns, 2 of them here today, Emily and Adam. We also have Charlie, and I just want to name check Brittany and Wafa, who helped us back at the development stage of this PhD Life, and were really pivotal in making sure it became what it is today.
Okay, so what we're going to talk about. So today I'm going to kick off by touching on what motivated us to develop this PhD Life. Jennifer's going to pick up on what it actually is. Emily's going to look at how and why it is a co-created event. And honestly, we've been thinking about PGR community almost constantly since the start of the pandemic. So Adam is going to explore what we've learnt about creating conditions for community. And then at the end, I'm going to pull things together and highlight how this PhD Life supports some of the university's strategic aims. So what motivated us to do this? Well, I'm going to be honest, this PhD Life started its existence rather differently. It was supposed to be a radical experiment in holding the first fully online conference. Yeah, we do get the irony of this. Suddenly the pandemic happened and it was October 2020 and the format had already really taken root across HE. So rather than put the idea in the bin, we decided to pivot it and see what we could do to make it into a peer-to-peer experience for sharing experiences and supporting each other, and a way of giving a safe space for researchers to get comfortable presenting in this new Zoom world. Starting off as a PGR was always challenging. I'm sure a lot of you went through that transition yourselves. And as the pandemic took us all online, postgraduate researchers were hit particularly hard. Peer communities are absolutely crucial for learning those ropes at the start of a PhD. So without those academic neighbourhoods, there was a real risk that researchers would flounder as they started to try to navigate doctoral life. Loads of the important things, the hidden curriculum things, if you like that kind of pedagogic term, simply can't be addressed through the deficit model of skills training workshops, even though that's what I do for a job and I love skills training workshops. No workshop is ever going to tell you how to use that slightly on the blink departmental microwave. No workshop is going to tell you which is the really nice lab technician. No workshop's going to take you aside when you're absolutely heartbroken because you think you found an article that completely ruins your PhD and says to you, no, it's all right. It hasn't. You've still got a PhD in there. All of those things are about academic neighbourhood. These informal peer networks were kind of scuppered by the pandemic. And that's where this PhD life comes in.
So that's the sort of context and motivation. So we had this idea for an online conference. The pandemic came along and sort of sharpened our focus. It gave us an idea of exactly how we could use this in a way that would really serve PGRs. So what does that look like in practice? So this PhD Life is a one-day conference. It happens twice a year. It happens in October and then again in January for new starts. And it happens about a fortnight after induction. The structure of the event is that we have a 30-minute keynote and then we have panels of roughly 3 to 4 papers with 15 minutes for questions at the end. And we have frequent tea breaks and lunch breaks too. In terms of platform, we use Zoom Webinar. We feel that people are more or less familiar with that by this point, but also the advantage there is that attendees can be as visible or as invisible as they choose. They can have their camera on and chat, or they can use the chat function to ask questions. The call for papers for the event goes out 1 month beforehand. We offer some questions as prompts, but the central question is this: what insider knowledge do you wish someone had shared with you at the start of your PhD? Which is maybe something you want to think about and maybe contribute in chat. So at the beginning of your PhD, what do you wish someone had told you? So the content is very much driven by participants and what they choose to share. And if you have a glance at the slide, you can see the real variety we get. So for example, managing supervisory relationships, someone talking about coming from full-time work into a PhD, note-taking techniques, managing mental health and self-care, a real range and all driven by PGRs themselves. In terms of the organisation, that is by and large carried out by our PGR interns. So not only is the content driven by PGRs, much of the organisation, 98% of the organisation, I would say, is actually done by our PGR interns. That's things like finding a keynote, making sure everything's scheduled, putting everything on Eventbrite, holding practice sessions as well for anyone who maybe hasn't delivered online. As we saw at the beginning, it can be trickier than it looks. And also, so if they are delivering content, we can maybe signpost services they might not have been aware of. There's also promotional materials and work that goes out on social media to try and get everyone interested and engaged. So you have this sort of dual face of the event. Joanna and I more behind the scenes, making sure it does feel university endorsed, but really the friendly, approachable face of the event are our PGR interns. And this is just an example of some of the materials that we use. So it's very recognizable. We've got specific hashtags. Engagement so far has been good. This year we had just over 170 people engaging with the event in October, 70 to 80 in January. There are fewer starts in January, and a high level of satisfaction. 94% of participants in feedback forms say that they really enjoyed it and found it valuable. So that's what the event actually is in practical terms.
And the aspects of this PhD life which has been central to its success is the role which PGRs occupy as co-creators of the event. When I say co-creators, I'm talking about two main aspects to PGR involvement. The first of these is the use of PGR interns, as Jennifer was talking about there, as both organisers beforehand and as facilitators on the day of the event. They, or I should say we, occupy a sort of liminal space between the realms of staff and PGR researchers, because we are both at different points. And the use of PGR interns as figureheads for an event like this PhD Life helps to foster a by PGRs for PGRs atmosphere. And it also potentially encourages participation from PGRs who might not have gotten involved if it came as a purely top-down initiative from staff. The second aspect of the role of PGRs as co-creators is actually the more important one, and that's that even out with the use of PGR interns, the conference is very much constructed as being by PGRs for PGRs. The key to this really is the way that the call for papers is structured. By inviting second and third year PGRs into a space where they're able to create the training that they themselves might have needed as new first years, the conference necessarily becomes PGR-led at the most important level, which is knowledge exchange. We as staff members are then simply there to facilitate the practicalities of the day and the conference experience. The peer-to-peer transmission of information and advice avoids a sort of overly PR feel on the day and encourages honesty, transparency, and vulnerability, elements which can be underestimated in traditional academic settings, but ultimately resonate with PGRs as human beings, especially human beings who are scared, confused, and more often than not, overwhelmed. Topics that may not attract PGRs if delivered as a formal session often turn out to be the topics that attract the most questions and engagement when delivered as a talk at the conference. Authenticity is a highly valued currency in PGR spaces. This kind of approach is necessarily based on generosity, of experience, of knowledge, of goodwill, from further on PGRs towards newer researchers. We found this to be a highly effective premise for encouraging PGRs to come forward with their experiences in the first place. You can measure this generosity in the fact that many are more than willing to return and give their papers at future iterations of the conference, or to be then involved in other PGR-led initiatives, either taking part in competitions like our flagship 3-minute thesis competition, or coming back to help new PGRs during future induction weeks. This generosity is, I think, central to the continued success of the conference and its different iterations. Those who benefited as audience members one year come forward as presenters the next in this really effective, continuous loop of knowledge exchange. Passing down knowledge of those more hidden aspects of PGR life becomes like a rite of passage that echoes down throughout the years, and people continue to do so. One of the keys to allowing PGRs to participate as genuine co-creators in this event is for staff to take a step back in moderating the content. It's necessary for PGRs to have a space to be honest about how tough the PhD journey can be and the time when things have gone wrong, including within the university itself. We know that there may be an element of fear in allowing PGRs to define both the space and the topics of discussion, specifically if you feel that there's scope for the space to become negative or for the presentation to become a vehicle for airing grievances. However, we haven't seen any evidence of this in practice. The call for papers helps to shape the overall tone, and a practice run provides a moment to catch any major problems before the conference itself, but to date we haven't encountered any. Since the majority of presenters have previously attended, the positive atmosphere of the conference has become self-sustaining at this point. PGRs really care about making new PGRs experiences positive ones. They don't want to instill fear. They simply want to let people know that sometimes things go wrong and help is available if they do. In this, the event becomes a solutions-focused space where difficult topics are covered in a way that helps to equip PGRs with the tools to deal with problems if and when they encounter them. This is the real way to make a difference in training provision for PGRs, not to pretend that the PhD or academic journey is going to be smooth sailing all of the time. We know perhaps now more than ever that it's not going to be, but to tell them that help is available and where to find it before they ever need it.
As Joanna was saying earlier, the pandemic made us all acutely aware of the extent to which we depend on different forms of community for support and to help us feel grounded in the things that matter to us. So when we're talking about conference as a site of community, I think it's really important to state the obvious and note that community isn't something you can create any more than you can force a plant to grow. What you can do is create the best conditions for something to take root of its own accord. If you're starting from scratch, you need to build a space, make sure people know it exists and have access in all of its senses, and make sure that it's attractive and useful enough for them to want to be there. The success and the really overwhelmingly positive atmosphere of this PhD life is partly due to the other ways that researcher development engages with PGRs already. Because I love that extended metaphor, I think of it as gardening. We have a really active social media presence with a warm, relaxed, friendly tone that shares news, opportunities, competitions, signposts PGRs to relevant resources, sometimes cat pictures, sometimes GIFs. Our successful blog by PGRs for PGRs is a model for the tone and the structure of this PhD life and helps to cultivate the honest but positive approach that we really hope presenters will take. And as Emily was saying, these initiatives are themselves led by PGR interns who are that bit closer to the ground and perhaps better able to exist in this strange mediated space between staff, researchers, and all the corners of the university structure. And there are inevitably tensions between these different elements. We might be better positioned to understand those from a PGR perspective and help to diffuse them. So we're trying to maintain a really diverse offer with a very recognizable tone and feel. And I prefer to think of it as a personality rather than as branding. You want it to be something that people feel open to, comfortable approaching. We also recognize within that community is going to look like different things to different people. Those parameters are really fluid and they can and shouldn't be pinned down. And this approach, we believe, feeds into the diversity of experiences that are on display at this PhD life. As has been outlined, it's PGR-led and allows presenters a lot of freedom in terms of what they want to say and how they want to say it, allowing people to express themselves in a more authentic, organic way has encouraged a diversity of experience and opinion that we wouldn't have been able to engineer deliberately. And touching briefly on access again, I think it's important to note that the shift online has opened up a platform for people who have trouble with access to physical spaces or with presenting because of anxiety, illness, disability, or simply because these can be intimidating spaces at the best of times, especially when your PowerPoint decides to go wrong at the start. The important thing is that when people see others with experiences like theirs at these events, they are inspired to come forward next time around. And we found that this generosity of spirit is the Build the Conference You Needed model provides a really encouraging platform for those who haven't seen their PGR experience illustrated yet and want to be the ones to talk about it. Thus, communities begin to form themselves, clustering around the things that people themselves think are important, not that we're prejudged to be important by other people. And the conference starts to become a sort of self-sufficient ecosystem, which in turn takes us back to the other ways that we communicate. Social media reach and engagement is often highest during and around this PhD life. And because we cultivate a really active presence in general, we find that people are ready to pick up, to share, to comment on what their friends and peers are doing. This expands our reach. It allows us to reach people in different spaces and forge more permanent connections. We also encourage participants to submit blog posts related to the presentation so that we can start to sow the seeds for the next edition. In this way, the blog too becomes a living library of PGR experiences and a map for those looking for reassurance and points of contact at what can be a really turbulent, if exciting, time in their lives.
As this PhD Life is one of our flagship events, before we wind up and take any questions you have, we wanted to just take a moment to reflect on how it also aligns with the wider strategic priorities of the University of Glasgow. Now, I'm sure you know the university's strategies off by heart, but I've just put the keywords here as a little reminder. And if we looked at that university strategy, I think this PhD Life taps into all three of those strategic pillars of community, of connectivity, and of challenges. And if we were looking at the research strategy, which of course, as the research and development team, we spend a lot of time doing, then it fosters a space for the mutual support implied in that collaboration pillar. And if I was digging into the learning and teaching strategy, and here I am cherry picking some quotes from the strategy. It is enabling research students to connect with their peers and develop the relationships that are essential to enabling well-being and retention. I stumbled over these words earlier because I'm reading them out directly from the strategy. It also is reflecting our values of inclusivity, well-being, integrity, and respect in our curriculum design. And it's working in partnership with students to support their development as flexible and adaptable graduates.
And just to pick up on some of that as well, I think so many of the talks today have focused on different aspects of the experience that are just central to that. So inclusivity, active learning, collaborative design, the recognition and representation of diverse needs. And we genuinely feel that although it was born slightly out of an emergency situation, the shift to online and the pandemic, we do genuinely feel that this PhD life is a really good and useful example of how those principles can actually be embodied in practice and how you can see them in the PGR space, where it's perhaps not always so visible as for undergraduates and postgraduate taught students. Because we do think it is genuinely useful and not a particularly expensive event to run unless you want to hire a very, very expensive external keynote, we would really welcome any questions or conversations if you want to chat to us more. If you want to view the recordings, those are available on our website or on our YouTube channel. If you want to get in touch with us for a chat to talk about how you might do this within your own subject area or within your own service, then we are more than happy to talk. Thanks very, very much for your time and very much for your patience.
Thanks very much, all of you, for an absolutely fascinating and quite inspiring input. So thanks for being so calm and patient at the beginning. That was quite inspiring for us in watching that these things can happen, but we get there. But also just listening to your talk, it sounds like a fantastic opportunity for new PhD students, but also for the presenters as well, in terms of their own development. We've got two questions, but I think they're really the same question, in as much as Julia and Nick have both asked just about your plans going forward in terms of this PhD life. Do you think you will think about a face-to-face element, or now have you sort of seen the benefits of online that you're going to keep to it?
I'm going to go out on a limb and speak for the team here. I would be saying we're going to keep it online. I think that what it accomplishes in terms of enabling researchers who haven't started in Glasgow yet, we also allow for pre-recorded talks, and we've had quite a few of those of people from all over the world. That idea that we are including people, even people on the Dumfries campus who can feel very isolated from the community here at Gilmore Hill. I think there are a huge number of benefits to it being online. That is not to say that I think all conferences should be online by any means. And we are looking to how other aspects of our kind of wider induction and transition provision can be pivoted back to campus to give people that chance to meet others in person. But I think that just the benefits of this being online are enormous. However, I mean, the others might disagree with me.
I think I would agree. I think the benefit of it being online as well, we have distance students who can't always make it to campus, and it means it's something they can access, and it's not particularly just for them. It means they can integrate with other people in the wider community. I can't see any real advantage to making an aspect of it online right now, to be honest. I don't know if Emily and Adam would agree.
I don't think so. I think it works very well in the space that it currently occupies. And I think that as we try and move some things back in person, it is good to keep some aspects of some things online, because there were so many problems with in-person things that didn't come to the fore until we all moved online during the pandemic and realized that it's much more accessible, and often not even in just the traditional idea of accessibility, but in terms of if you're nervous to go and do your first conference presentation, and that is what this PhD life often is for these PhD researchers, the online aspect I think is probably the most comforting part of it. So I don't know what would be gained by moving it back in person, or not back in person.
I think also a lot in terms of building community, a little bit the same thing. It's not just giving the presentation, it's also, I mean, conferences are an opportunity to meet other people in person, but when you have kind of just come in, that is intimidating. I left full-time employment and I'm in my 30s, and it was still really intimidating to come in and strike up those initial conversations with other people. And actually you find great things happening in the chat on the Zoom webinar, and people sort of making connections, recognizing others, and reaching out. And it just provides, I think, that degree of security that being in a lecture hall doesn't.
Thanks for that. There's another kind of slightly kind of related question just about whether you've considered using a different platform for the conference away from Zoom. Are you quite happy with Zoom?
What I really like about Zoom is everybody knows how to use it. It's very, very simple. It's a very simple interface. It's fairly stable for most people. You don't really need to run training sessions on how to use it. I mean, we do offer them, but they were taken up at the start and now really not. And everybody has a university account. So there's that sense of, you know, here's not only a tool that we're using, but also here's how easy it is. You too could use it if you wanted to for things. And I like that kind of modeling of good practice and opportunity to use a technology that's not that difficult, and for other people to see how to do that. So whilst things like Remo are, you know, allow a really diverse and interesting range of interactions, I think the simplicity of this, particularly at that early stage where everything is very intimidating and very new, has big pluses. But again, I'm gobby. Anyone else got anything feel free to disagree with me.
I think I would agree. I think Zoom at this point has the advantage. Most people know how to use it. They're going to be using it probably for supervisory meetings, for training sessions with us as research and development. So it's actually a sneaky way of maybe getting some implicit training in really early on. So again, I think the advantages just are really apparent there.
Do you mind if I ask a question? And I haven't posted it, but just to use my chairperson's advantage. I'm thinking just about the opportunities for the presenters at your conference who have they've presumably developed a confidence and developed skills in attending conferences and everything. Do you have any kind of debrief, any meeting with them afterwards, just to talk through what they've learned and the sort of helping them to articulate their transferable skills from that experience?
I am going to jump in, not because I think I'm the best person to answer that question, but because on my screen, I see that Jennifer and Adam are struggling with their connection. If they're not, they might want to jump in my place.
I think I don't, I mean, Jennifer and Emily can maybe speak to any, I don't know that there's a formal element of that, but there's certainly a kind of soft debrief. The interns would always be in touch afterwards to say thank you, first and foremost, to touch base, make sure that everything went okay. So in an informal way, yes, that there is a contact afterwards, and we often, well, we invite, I think everybody, should they wish to stay in touch. They often get re-invited. They often are asked to come back. They submit blog posts, etc. And there's a lot happening on social media around that as well. And if they choose to be directly involved in that, we will tag them. We'll directly cite them, etc. So there's a social space in which that happens, I think, rather than a formal space.
Yeah, I would agree. I've noticed on Twitter sometimes, not immediately after, sometimes a few weeks after or a few months after, participants reflecting on it or talking about it or what they would maybe say differently now. And I think that's nice as well, that it's maybe taken away from the conference and carried out in their own space. And I think that points again to what Adam mentioned, the idea of smaller communities forming in different ways and continuing that conversation out with the scope of the conference itself.
Definitely. And there's also the aspects of people editing their presentations and changing them based on what they know now is also, you can see it in the fact that we often have the same presenters come back from October to January for the new intake of PGRs, and they often will ask if they're allowed to edit their talk, if they're allowed to change it based on what they now think would be more useful to add into it. In which they can also see from the fact that we put the recorded presentations online and we share them with the presenters as well after the fact, so that they can watch back and see what they thought about their own presentation later on. And I do think what you picked up on there about if we've ever had a sort of debrief with them, trying to encourage them to let them know how to use these transferable skills. Never something in that specific way, but it actually might be a very good This PhD Life presentation in itself at a future iteration of the conference, actually, is sort of how to use those sort of conference and academic transferable skills going forward. So I think that we'll pick up on that one.
There's your talk for the next conference, Emily. Boom.
Thanks very much. That was a very cool answer. We don't have any other questions at the moment. I'll just give everybody the opportunity to thank you very much. I'm going to applause. That was fantastic, really interesting presentation. If there's no other questions coming in, I think we can probably just take the opportunity to be able to get a quick coffee before the closing remarks of the conference. So thanks again, all of the presenters, and thanks everyone for coming along.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.